Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're checking in on the 30 Minutes Missions line with the Iglight 01. This looks like a really cool design. Kind of reminds me a lot of the Alto, kind of going back to where it all began with this series. But this is sort of like a more kind of angled, edgy, not really edgy, I don't know. It's sort of just very angled, kind of more refined sort of design. I really like the look of this one quite a lot. It's got that cool white, gray, and purple color scheme that we have seen with the Alto and other kits in the series before as well. So really looking forward to checking this one out. As you can see, pretty small box, so going to be a simple, quick build for that. And so thought we would also take the opportunity to take a look at an option set here. Option set 16 gives us some arms and legs, but you can kind of make your own whole little robot basically here out of this set, it looks like, but otherwise you can separate it out and have it be different option parts for different 30 Minutes Mission stuff, Gunpla stuff, Armored Core stuff. You can use this with a lot of different things, so that's what we're going to check out in today's video as well as the main kit. So let's go ahead and start with that one. So all right, checking out the Iglight first, a couple of different things that I noticed here on this one. So this is all kind of very typical for the 30 Minutes Mission series, but I think this little bit here on the side is kind of new as far as I can remember. I think a lot of like the main series 30 Minutes Missions releases haven't always included this little bit about the snap fit and the kind of you don't need paint, you don't need glue or anything like that. They haven't included this on the front of the box. I think that's something new. But the art of the Iglight here looks really cool, as is normal for the line. Like I said, you just have this CG render there of the Iglight here on the front, and in the background a kind of action scene there where you can see a few other different, I believe that it's an Alto and a Rabiat there in the background, and the Esposito, I believe, is up there flying. So you got kind of a bunch of different mecha here from the series. Okay, this is another one of those boxes where it's vertical on one side and horizontal on the other side. Interesting. So you can see this is number 71 in the line. Crazy how long this line has been going, just kind of how much stuff there is in the 30 Minutes Missions line now, but it's really, really cool. So yeah, again, this little bit here, also just another reminder that you don't need any tools or anything for this. It's just easy to assemble. So they really seem to be marketing this release in particular basically in the same way that they would like an entry grade. So it almost seems like sort of like an entry grade release from the line, when I mean they've all been very simple to construct and, you know, very similar, I think, already to the entry grade lineup, just kind of in terms of the complexity of the builds and everything and the quality of the build too. But this one does seem to be kind of marketed in a very similar way with this type of branding here on the box. So it's kind of interesting, but you can see some more about the action, the articulation, the weapons, and everything that you have with this. Has this cool joint there in the forearm that will swivel side to side for the shield mount. So that's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. On the other side here, a little bit, of course, how you can customize it with all sorts of different parts from the 30 Minutes Missions option parts and kit bash with other kits and all sorts of different cool stuff that you can do with these, of course. All right, let's pop it open. So with a box this thin, there's really only going to be a couple of runners in there. It looks like 3 runners in total. And then we're going to see a lot of the same stuff here in the instruction manual, but you have some information over here on the side. That's going to be there in Japanese and in English about the Iglight and the Examax and also the Roy there, so you can check that out. The Iglight 01, here's the story, again in Japanese, and then over here in English if you want to check that out. I do wonder if Bandai will ever make any sort of like animation series from the 30 Minutes Missions line, or like at least a manga or anything like that, just kind of anything other than just the story, which is printed in the instruction manuals here for this. But here you can see kind of the different factions. Then around on the other side, again, just talking about how you can get bashed by mixing and matching all sorts of different parts from different releases in the line. You can, of course, kit bash these with different weapon sets and then other non-30 Minutes Mission stuff as well. A lot of the stuff is, you know, to varying degrees compatible with a lot of like HG Gunpla, and then, you know, other stuff that's like technically a part of the line, HG Armored Core and everything like that. So for that custom build that you saw on the outside of the box, here's breaking down, you know, exactly what goes into that. If you wanted to make something exactly like that, they show you what parts are used. And then we should inside here also have our parts list somewhere. Oh, yep, I missed it because it's so small, but there's the parts list right there. And then we just have our construction. So it looks like the entirety of the construction is going to be all in color here, which is awesome. Should be a pretty simple build with only 3 runners. You know, you're not expecting a whole lot as far as the building process, but let's go ahead and check those runners out here. The A runner is going to be in 4 colors. There's some clear green up there, this nice purple color, this white, sort of just barely off-white color there, and then a couple of parts here in gray. It looks like those are probably the knee joints. Runner B is going to be the rest of our white parts here for the kit, parts for the head, arms, legs, and everywhere else. And runner C is going to be the rest of our joint parts here. I think our hand parts should be on this runner as well. Yep, right there. So basically everything that's meant to be sort of part of the frame and the joints and all that. So yeah, very, very simple, very low part count, but it should be a very simple and easy construction. Just looking at this here, as they were illustrating on the outside of the box, it looks like all the gates here are all going to be touch gates. I still like to cut them with nippers just to be safe, because even though they're touch gates and you're meant to just be able to just pop them out, you can still sometimes you might actually damage the part, especially on like a fine little edge like right there. I would still recommend just cutting that with nippers and making sure you get a good clean cut with that. But you know, these touch gates are meant to be able to just snap the parts out by hand and not have to use any tools. So if you wanted to do that, you could, or if you wanted to get this for like a friend or somebody who's a beginner and you want to like let them know like, hey, you don't even need any tools to build this, seems like this would certainly be a good option for a very beginner friendly kit, even more so than everything else in the line. So very cool. Let's check it out. All right, guys, then here is the little guy all built up. Obviously a really quick, really fun, simple little build here, but you can see it's really going to be a good one for customization, as this just makes for a really simple, just like base model that then we can add more stuff to. And that's what we're going to do once we get into it here. But we'll first just take a look at our included accessories here for the base kit. We'll take a look at some different things that this can do just kind of on its own. If this is, you know, maybe you just like it on its own, you don't want to add more stuff to it. But we'll take a look at the kit here in some more detail, and then we'll get into the options set. So let's go ahead and get into it. And our accessories are really just gonna consist of the weapon and the Roy, and they are gonna look very similar actually here. So for the Roy, first of all, it just basically looks like this little squid kind of thing. It's just these two pieces here like that. So you can see how you might be able to mix and match this. Essentially, this is kind of, at least for this kit, and for using this without any modification, we can attach this here onto the arm, sort of like a shield. One thing that I do really like about this kit is this use of this connection point here on like the back side of the forearm that is able to rotate either to the back or to the side. So I really like that feature. But this can be attached onto the back of the arm there. Also acts as sort of like a claw weapon. It doesn't actually close or anything. It does sort of also remind me a little bit of like the gravity gun from Half-Life or from the Portal series. So you can kind of imagine it being something like that. And then we've got the weapon, which is just basically this little handgun style looking weapon, which has that same part there at the end. That's optional. You can remove that if you didn't want to have that on there. Just have it as the gun here like that. The handle does also fold up, and kind of the point of this is so that you can kind of have this as like a little gun sentry kind of thing here, something like that, which is pretty cool as well, I will say. So without the leg on there, this can also just be attached to the forearm. You can have that just as like an arm mounted gun there, and then the hand is still free to hold onto like a different weapon or something if you wanted to, something like that. Would have been cool if you had a hard point here on the top of the shoulder to be able to attach the gun onto there. Would have been a good spot. But that's really it for the accessories. These weapon holding hands as standard is kind of all that you're going to have with this. The backpack obviously is, I guess, sort of like an accessory, obviously being a sort of optional part there. You've just got hard points here on the back, and the backpack just gives you kind of a different set of hard points there in kind of different arrangement. You have hard points here on the back of the shoulder, on the back of the hips, the back of the legs, the front of the legs, the side of the legs, not on the bottom of the feet. Good to know there. And then not the standard 3mm hard points, but just these rectangular hard points here on the front of the legs. And then of course these C-clip anchor points here on the sides of the hips as well, if you wanted to add some skirt armor, some side skirt armor onto there anyway. So that's really kind of about it. But the clear part there for the head does look really nice. You got those clear parts in the chest, which are not going to be quite as noticeable, but they definitely help break up just this white section here on the front. If you're planning on adding more to this or not, one thing I would definitely recommend you do would just be some pen aligning, because you do have a lot of really nice detail in here in the white areas, but it's not really going to stand out all that well with those parts being molded in just this like pure bright white plastic. So definitely some pen aligning will help bring out the details. The articulation is also going to be pretty standard with just a single joint there in the elbow, but as you can see, you do get a pretty full bend out of that. The midsection here will have a little bit of ab crunch there like that. The leg can be brought up here quite far, and that double joint with the separation of this purple part of knee armor right there for a nice full bend is really nice. So really good range of articulation here with this, as you might expect, with it being a very simple design here, and essentially being very similar to like an entry grade kit in terms of the construction, if you wanted to compare it to something from Gunpla anyway, if you've not built a lot of these 30-minute mission kits. If you are an avid 30-minute missions builder, then obviously not going to be any surprises here when it comes to the articulation. And so taking a look at the kit here in a few different poses, you can obviously add a lot to the dynamic posing range of this by putting it up on an action base. Of course, that's not included, but definitely recommended. And so even on its own here, it is going to be a very minimal kit, but I think it does a pretty good job of giving you some great options just in terms of the posing and the weapons, what's included in here. It's not a lot, but I think you can do a fair amount with it. That said, obviously you can do a lot more by getting some additional weapon or option sets, mixing and matching with other kits from the series. There's obviously a lot more that you can do with this, and that's kind of the whole point of the series too, is to customize. And so we will be taking a look at that option set here in a minute, but I just think overall for a small simple kit, which really does kind of remind me a lot of the Alto, really, it's kind of a callback to the very first kit out in the line. I think it's a fun little kit on its own. It's a great base for customization, or it would be a great kit to get for someone, you know, if you have a friend or family member or someone who's interested in getting into like trying some model building like this. This is definitely a good option for a beginner model builder as well. Okay, so as for the option parts set 16 here, as said before, this is the arm unit and leg unit 1. And yeah, it looks like you can basically build your own full kind of mecha there, which is quite unique looking there, but you can also just use this as arms and leg parts. And then everything else, I mean, you can kind of use like these parts here, you could use as like a backpack or something like that. I'm sure you can find lots of cool uses for some of these parts. These arms are basically just like missile pods there, but you have some options there, whether you want to have like the claws or the missile pods. Basically a lot of very interesting, useful looking parts here. And you'll also notice the joints, like I believe the elbow joints there as well, kind of the elbow joints and knee joint are molded to look like a sort of like a cloth covering, which in gray, I mean, just kind of, it looks cool, but would look even cooler if you were to paint that, you know, in kind of like a brownish or tannish color or whatever, which is we typically see for like cloth covering over joints and things like that. So basically a lot of really cool and useful parts in here for kit bashing, I think. So this is why this is a set I really wanted to take a look at. But on the side of the box there, you'll see again that mecha guy that you can make out of this on one side. On the other side, this is the other custom mech that we saw on the front of the box, and you can see this is number 29 in the series. And over here on the side of the box, again, it's just breaking down everything that's included, kind of what you can make with this, some of the different option parts for the arms and legs, and how you have different options for that, just basically by switching that kind of torso section, how you can kit bash some of these parts with some other builds there. Here you can see a few different examples of that on a few different releases from the 30 Minutes Missions lineup. So like I said, this part set looks like it's got some really useful parts for kit bashing. So here you can see another couple of examples there customized on the other side of the box. And let's go ahead and check it out inside here. So it's all going to be molded in gray, no surprise there. Interestingly, 4 or 5 runners, so a good amount of stuff in there. This box is actually thicker than the Iglight box was, but the instructions are certainly smaller, with these being fairly simple here, just a couple of fold out pages. Everything's all in color, but the parts of course are all in gray. I guess it's not in color. The backside is not in color here. There's our parts list and part of the construction. So basically we'll show you how to build the different sections and kind of how to put them together to make that little guy, and then you can kind of try it out from there by mixing and matching with other different kits, kind of however you might see fit. And we will try out a few different options here. Before our runners, we've got some polycaps here, PC7 for some polycap ball joints there in gray. The B runner is going to be a very familiar runner here. This is actually the 30 Minutes Missions frame runner. I believe this is the frame runner that's used for the Spinatio kits as well as the Atcherby kits, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. So one that you've probably built many times before. And then our other 4 runners here are labeled OPS 16-A1, A2, A3 for these, with this being obviously OPS option set 16. Here's runner A1, and runner A2 has some copied sections there with these parts there, kind of like for the head being separated. And then runners A3 and A4 similarly have this main section of those copied, with these parts for like the torso section separated off there like that. So looks pretty interesting for sure. Let's check it out. And so all put together, it basically just makes like a full mecha unit here, arms, legs, head, torso, everything. So you could just have this, you know, it's an option set, but it does make essentially a full kit here. Or of course you can break it down into different sections and use it for, you know, kit bashing purposes and whatever, but just kind of as a set overall. The torso is basically one chunk, so there's no rotation or bending or anything there in the torso. It's going to be very fixed, but the head, this kind of head thing here, is on like kind of a normal neck joint there, so you can move that all around. The shoulders and arms are just going to work everything like as normal, and the same here with the legs, the feet, and all that. So as you can see with these separate parts, you have a number of different hard points around on different areas here. C-clip connection points here on like the back of these leg option parts, on the bottom of the hip section there, right there as well. So we've got 2 different options for the arms, and you can have them symmetrical or asymmetrical. I just went for asymmetrical just to show you guys both options at once. But if you did want to have like these kind of like missile pod or Gatling gun hands, however you want to classify those. You can have them both be the same, or you can have two claw hands if you want. You've got the parts for that. And then similarly for the legs, you've got the option of either these big chunky legs with this big knee kind of armor piece there, and these large feet, very reminiscent of something like the nightingale's feet or something like that. But we've got options for different feet. That these ones look a bit more sort of like either like space or aquatic kind of feet there like that, and different parts here for the lower leg that are not quite so big and chunky, much more kind of streamlined here. So again, it's just a matter of, in this case, it didn't really seem as logical to make the legs asymmetrical. It might look a bit odd, but I mean, you surely could if you wanted to. There's a number of different parts left over, most of which not particularly useful, but it did make mention of this in the manual, that you can have this little connection piece here plugged onto that foot part. This is like the connection piece that you've seen with a lot of different 30 minutes mission kits used for connecting the front ankle armor onto like the top of the foot essentially. So if you wanted to like switch that around and then have some kind of piece of armor there attached onto the front of there, you can see there's another C-clip attachment point there up underneath that part here on the lower leg. So obviously a bunch of different attachment points and options all around. So as a set on its own, it makes for a cool little kind of chunky, stompy little robot here. Kind of very odd looking, but with a cool coat of paint on it. I mean, it's just being all molded here in gray. It's not really going to look the part, but you can imagine this actually like painted up and weathered and everything. It would actually be looking pretty cool just on its own. So whether you wanted to have this just on its own, or if you wanted to use this for parts here, and I will show you a few different examples of mixing and matching some of the parts with the Iglight, which I'll admit the Iglight, kind of the shape and kind of proportions of the Iglight maybe don't really mesh particularly well with these option parts. Probably would be better to try to use these on something that's a bit more chunky, or I guess you just kind of make it a little bit more chunky by using these parts. And again, I think it's really going to come down to a lot of the cohesion between the parts when it comes to kit bashing like this is just going to come down to the paint. Once it's painted to look more cohesive, and then again, you can either add some like weathering on there or something just to kind of help tie it all together. It'll look a lot better than kind of as you're seeing it now. Now you're seeing just these big gray parts that, you know, look very different and look like they obviously kind of don't go together with the Iglight kit, which is just this nice bright white. But you can imagine how this is going to look once everything's painted. The other really cool thing about this option set is that, of course, it gives you those connection parts for like those sections of the arms and legs that have that molded cloth covering, which is really cool. So you don't have to make that, although making cloth covering sections of robot kind of joints and areas like this, not the most difficult thing to make. Essentially just using some epoxy putty and then just kind of molding it to look like cloth. I will admit it definitely takes a little bit of finesse. I've tried it a few times and I'm not an expert at it, but you know, it does take a little practice. But if you just wanted to make like a cloth covering on your own for anything, it's not the most difficult thing to make. But it is cool with this set that at least it does give you a few parts there that you can use if you did want to make a robot that had that kind of cloth covering effect going on it. So definitely a lot of really cool parts here with this set. You can see the potential there for some really cool kit bashing options with some of the parts that you have with this. So definitely check it out. If you guys want to check out some more 30 minutes missions, 30 minutes label stuff in general, 30 minute sisters, 30 minute fantasy, all that, Armored Core, you can check all that out on the website and the link in the video description to US at Gundam store, all that good stuff, all the Armored Core stuff too. And remember, all this stuff is all compatible. It's all based around the same joint system. So there's a whole lot of compatibility between all the 30 minutes label line stuff and high grade stuff and Kotobukiya stuff as well. I mean, it's all pretty compatible. So the whole idea is just to get creative with it, right? So that's gonna be it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed taking a look at these couple of sets. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And until next time, hope you guys are all doing well. See you later. Bye.